Henry VI is the most sympathetic of all England's medieval monarchs, but he was a king whose reign cannot be regarded as anything but a disaster. A theme throughout medieval history is after the reign of a powerful king came a far less successful successor. Edward I, for example, stood in stark contrast to his successor, his son, Edward II. Edward I was a fine warrior king and known as the Hammer of the Scots, and Edward II enjoyed laborious tasks rather than marching into battle, and kept personal favourites such as Piers Gaveston and the Despensers. Another example is Edward III being succeeded by his grandson, Richard II. Edward III started the 100 Years' War and was victorious at Crécy and Poitiers, whilst Richard II's reign descended into complete tyranny. And here we have Henry VI succeeding his father, Henry V. When Henry VI came to be king, his father had battered the French into total submission, married the daughter of the French king, Charles VI, and had himself declared heir to the French crown, and thereby would have united the English and French crowns. However, when he died of dysentery prematurely in 1422, aged just 35, the situation changed rapidly, and in 1429 a young French peasant girl turned the tide of the 100 Years' War firmly in the favour of the French. And this is Joan of Arc. And although Joan was executed, and Henry was crowned King of France by the English in December 1431, the fact of the matter is, the war would soon be lost for the English. And in 1453, it drew, finally, to a close, 116 years after Edward III had started it. And the loss of the 100 Years' War quickly turned into civil war at home, as people like Richard, Duke of York, turned their attentions to trying to claim the throne of England from Henry's weak grasp. So weak was Henry that his cause was taken up by his queen, Margaret of Anjou, a formidable woman, as men around them closed in on Henry. Touchingly, Margaret and Henry seem to have enjoyed a good relationship. There is a nice story told of Margaret and Henry sitting in bed all day, laughing and enjoying each other's company. Indeed, Margaret must have realised it quite unusual to be married to a king such as Henry. He was respectful of her, didn't keep mistresses, which was quite customary for medieval kings at the time, and was meek and gentle. Whilst Henry's meekness, fragile mental health, and lack of basic medieval kingly qualities made him quite unfit to rule, it does, however, make Henry one of the most likeable characters in medieval history. If he had been destined for anything other than monarchy, or perhaps born in a later period, his reputation would have been quite different. Instead, sadly, his reign descended into general anarchy, and he lost his throne in the early months of 1461. The death of Richard, Duke of York, at the Battle of Wakefield in late 1460 should have presented Henry and his forces with the opportunity they needed to re-establish authority in England. However, Richard's son, Edward, a capable young man who ended his military career undefeated, took the crown off Henry, and he became Edward IV. In somewhat bizarre fashion, Henry spent the best part of the next decade wandering around the north of England and also in Scotland without being captured and officially deposed and got rid of by Edward. Edward too seems to have lacked a certain ruthlessness, or perhaps he felt Henry's kindly nature didn't necessarily deserve a brutal end. It did cost him, though, as Margaret of Anjou, along with her one-time enemy, the Earl of Warwick, returned to depose Edward and briefly reinstated Henry VI as king. However, Edward eventually returned and had himself reinstated on the English throne, and this time he did depose Henry, and he formally got rid of him and his heir. Henry VI was murdered, possibly by Edward IV's brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the future Richard III, at the Tower of London.